Hey, tonight I want to take you back to one of the most important fights of the COVID era. Not because we need to live in the past, not because we need to replay every argument from 2020 and 2021. No, we need to go back because the people who were wrong are still trying to tell us that they were right. And the people who stood up for freedom are still being treated as if they've committed some kind of sin against the political establishment. Newly released diary entries from Dr. Anthony Fauci put that fight back on the spotlight. Back in an August 2021 entry, Fauci wrote that Governor Ron DeSantis was a complete disgrace because DeSantis was blocking local authorities from imposing mask mandates, including in schools. Fauci was furious. He saw Florida's refusal to obey the preferred federal script as reckless, dangerous, and somehow a threat to the country itself. Now, Governor DeSantis had a simple answer when that entry resurfaced. Badge of honor. And you know what? He was right. Not because every decision made during COVID was easy, and not because COVID was not real. Not because people didn't get sick and suffer and die, because they did. Many families are still carrying that grief. But the question was never whether COVID existed. The question was whether fear gave government unlimited power over the lives of free people. Now, that is the question Fauci and the public health bureaucracy never seemed to understand. Or maybe they understood it perfectly and didn't care. To them, a citizen was not a person with rights, responsibilities, a job, a family, a church, a business, and a life. A citizen became a risk factor, a number, a potential spreader. And when you see human beings that way, it becomes much easier to order them around. Stay home, close your business, keep your children out of school, cover the faces of little kids. Do not visit your mother in a nursing home. Don't go to church. Don't go to a funeral. Don't question the experts. Don't ask where the virus came from. Don't question the vaccine. And if you do question any of it, you are selfish, stupid, dangerous, and somehow a threat to our democracy. Now, Florida did not take that path. Florida did not pretend the virus was not dangerous. Florida protected seniors, expanded treatment access, encouraged people at high risk to take the threat seriously, and made the vaccine available. But Florida also remembered that the people needed to work, and kids needed to learn. Churches needed to minister, at that time more than ever. Families needed to make the decisions based on their own circumstances. And businesses needed the freedom to survive. That last part matters more than people who criticize Florida will ever admit. There were business owners around the country who poured their life savings and their guts and their blood and their everything into a restaurant or a salon or a gym or a small store or some service business. And then overnight, the government told them that they were non-essential. Think about the arrogance of that phrase, non-essential. The government can decide whether your work, your life work matters. Government can decide whether you can feed your family. Government can decide whether the business that you built is worthy of even existing. Florida said no. And that's why Florida became a refuge for so many people. Americans moved here because they wanted to live again. They wanted their kids in school. They wanted to worship. They wanted to go to work. They wanted to open their businesses without begging a local bureaucrat for permission. They didn't move here because Florida had no COVID. They moved here because Florida had something the rest of the country was losing. Common sense. Now, Fauci's diary entry is revealing for another reason. He didn't simply disagree with DeSantis on a policy question. He treated DeSantis and Rand Paul and conservative media and anybody who challenged him as part of some dark, coordinated attack on science itself. That's the problem. Dr. Fauci didn't not just want to make an argument. He wanted his judgment treated as the final word. But science is not supposed to be one man's final word. Science is supposed to be a process. It's supposed to involve questions, competing theories, evidence, debate, and correction. When the public was told not to question Fauci because he represented science, remember that? We were not being asked to respect science. We were being asked to submit to authority. And authority does not like to be questioned. That's why this was really, that's what this was all about. Fauci wasn't angry merely because DeSantis had a different view of masks in school. He was angry because DeSantis proved that a governor could resist the federal pressure machine. He was angry because Florida gave the rest of the country a real-life comparison. Florida became a control group in the national experiment. The establishment said that if Florida did not lock down forever, impose every mandate, and follow every Fauci recommendation, the state would collapse. They said DeSantis was sacrificing people. And they said Florida would become a disaster. They said parents who did not want their children masked all day were irresponsible. They also said that business owners who wanted to be open were greedy. They said that people who questioned the vaccine mandates were dangerous. And then something happened. Florida kept going. Sky didn't fall. The state didn't become an apocalyptic wasteland the media predicted. The kids went back to school. Families got back to life. Hell, visitors came from all over the world. Businesses reopened. People had the ability to make choices for themselves. Now, that didn't mean that there were no hard days. It did mean that the permanent emergency the experts seemed ready to impose was not the only possible path. And that is why the legacy media was so furious with Ron DeSantis. He didn't just disagree with him on television. He produced an alternative. He showed Americans that there was another way to govern during a crisis. And when that other way didn't produce the catastrophe they promised, it made their certainty look a lot less impressive. The political class hates a successful example of independence. It threatens their entire business model. They need us to believe that we are helpless without them. They need us to believe that the only credentialed experts in Washington can decide what's safe, what's true, and what freedom we are allowed to keep. DeSantis said, in effect, that Florida citizens were still citizens, not subjects, not children, not pieces on a public health chessboard. Now, let's be honest about something. We should not turn COVID into a bumper sticker. There were serious questions. There were different risks for different people. An elderly person with a major health condition faced a very, very different situation than a healthy young adult. A family with an immune-compromised child had a different set of concerns than a family without one. That's exactly why this one-size-fits-all mandates were such a bad idea. The answer to different risks is not to pretend that every person is the same. The answer is to give people clear information and clear access to treatment, and the freedom to make responsible decisions. Protect the vulnerable. Tell the truth. Please don't hide the data. Don't punish doctors for asking questions. Don't force 7-year-olds to sit behind a mask for 6 hours a day as though that this is a definition of compassion. And don't use the word science as a weapon against parents. Parents had every right to ask whether masks helped their own children. They had every right to ask about speech development, social development, learning, and mental health. They had every right to ask why the rules seemed to change every few weeks. They had every right to ask politicians who could attend parties, protests, dinners, and photo ops, while ordinary Americans were told to stay home. The same people who told us to trust them without question were often the first people caught out living, not living by the rules that they imposed. That alone told us something important, that they did not really believe these were moral principles. They believed that these were instruments of control. Rules for you, exceptions for them. Now, Governor DeSantis understood that leadership requires more than repeating whatever Washington says at a press conference. Leadership requires judgment. It requires the courage to take the political heat. It requires a willingness to be called names by people who will never apologize when they're wrong. And make no mistake, he took plenty of heat. The national media came after him. The medical establishment came after him. Democrats came after him. Even some Republicans flinched, because that's what Republicans do, because a lot of Republicans, a decent amount of Republicans, are freaking cowards. But he held the line. He kept Florida from becoming another place where local officials could impose sweeping restrictions with little accountability and no real endpoint. He pushed back against school mask mandates. He pushed back against vaccine passports. Now, I can go down a rabbit trail. My wife and I were supposed to go visit her brother during that time. I think it was sometime late 21. And we got the plane tickets. We were ready to go. And then he called. Now, he's her oldest brother. So I think Cecil is in his late 70s, early 80s. He wasn't there. And he basically said, if my wife and I had not taken the vaccine, there was really no reason to come, because they wouldn't let us go anywhere. Not them, not her brother, but the town of Rochester, New York, wasn't going to allow us to do anything, because we had to show proof that we had the vaccine, or a vaccine. So we didn't go. Canceled the flight. Southwest was really good about holding the flight. I think they held that money for a year, and then it was gone. Poof. Yes. Although you could come to Florida and do whatever you wanted, because at the time I was working at a local theme park here in the Tampa area, and we were open. We were doing this silly ass temperature tent, but we were open, and people came from all over the world. We were slammed every day, and that was the difference. Because that fight over vaccine passports was especially important. Once government and private institutions can require you to display your medical status to work, travel, eat, attend an event, or participate in ordinary life, they've created a system like they did in Rochester. Americans should never accept. You have created a two-tiered society, and the people advocating for it will always tell you that it's only temporary, and it's only for safety, and it's only for this emergency. When in fact, there were people out there on the other side telling people, "Good, we should make it as difficult for those dirty non-vaxxers as we possibly can." They should see all the stuff they're going to miss out doing, because we're not going to let them. We're not going to let them live their lives. We're not going to let them go to school. We're not going to let them go to work. We're not going to let them go eat or go to a movie, or we're not going to let them. It was pretty serious, but it was for this emergency. But emergencies have a way of expanding when politicians discover the power that comes with them. That's why Americans must be skeptical when the government claims extraordinary authority. It's not because we don't care about public health. No, of course not. It is because we care about liberty. We know what rights given away during a crisis are not always easily returned after the crisis is passed. Now, another lesson in this Fauci diary entry: the people in power often confuse criticism with danger. Fauci described criticism of him as a threat to democracy. But in a free country, criticizing officials is not a threat to democracy. It's what democracy is. Questioning people with power is not an attack on science. It is the responsibility of citizens. Nobody elected Anthony Fauci president or anything else. Nobody elected him governor. Nobody elected him school board chair. Yet for a time, his opinions affected every part of American life. That's amazing. That's why he had to be questioned. That's why Rand Paul questioned him. That's why governors like Ron DeSantis had a duty to push back. And that's why citizens who felt something was wrong had every right to speak. The real danger to democracy is when people in authority decide that dissent must be silenced. The danger is when social media companies censor discussions at the request of government agencies. The danger is when journalists become public relations agents for unelected bureaucrats. The danger is when ordinary people are punished for asking questions that later turned out to be perfectly reasonable. And we've seen way too much of this over the past several years. Questions about the origin of COVID were mocked and suppressed. Questions about the effectiveness of various policies were treated as disinformation or misinformation, right? Questions about natural immunity, vaccine mandates, school closures, lockdown, harm that were often shut down before they could honestly be debated. That's not how confident institutions behave. That's how institutions behave when they're afraid of scrutiny. The answer is not to worship Ron DeSantis. No. The answer is to learn from the courage he showed. We need more leaders who understand that their job is not to protect the reputation of the federal bureaucracy. Their job is to protect the people they serve. Their job is not to make life easier for Washington, D.C. Their job is to stand between Washington and the citizens when Washington overreaches. So Fauci calling DeSantis a disgrace was meant as an insult. It reads like confirmation. If opposing endless mandates and school closures and vaccine passports and government by emergency makes you a disgrace in Anthony Fauci's eyes, then wear that criticism proudly. Because Florida did not just make a policy choice. Florida made a statement about what kind of country America is supposed to be. America is not supposed to be a country where a small group of experts can suspend liberty whenever they feel like it. America is supposed to be a country where we protect the vulnerable without destroying the freedom of everybody else. It's supposed to be a country where parents matter, and where workers matter, churches matter, businesses matter, and citizens have the right to challenge the people giving orders. That is the legacy of that fight. Not that Ron DeSantis won an argument with Anthony Fauci. The real victory is that millions of Americans saw that they did not have to surrender their common sense. They saw that fear does not have to run the country. They also saw that freedom still needs leaders who are willing to defend it. And that's why Anthony Fauci is, criticism indeed is a badge of honor. Now, yesterday, day before, I was looking through some videos from here on YouTube, and I noticed one of the ones that had been taken down. It was during the COVID era. I watched it, I still don't know what I said in that video that had to be removed. But I was critical. I did ask questions. I kept saying things like, "Oh, please talk to your doctor. Please talk to your doctor." And I still say that. Please talk to your doctor about the vaccine, about getting the vaccine or not getting the vaccine. Have a conversation with your doctor, please. I'm not your doctor. Anthony Fauci is not your doctor. You know, Dr. Birx is not your doctor. Or she might be, but probably not. Deborah Birx is her name. So if you agree that America needs more leaders that will defend liberty when it's unpopular, please subscribe to this channel here, Fight Back Media Group, on the YouTube channel, or on Rumble. Share this episode with somebody who remembers what it felt like when the government tried to tell us that normal life was no longer allowed. My name is Willie Lawson, and this is the Morning Report. Till we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye-bye now.